I want to start with Professor Reich. Professor Robert Reich is the Chancellor's Professor of Public Policy at the Rhoda Goldman School of Public Policy, University of California, Berkeley, former U.S. Labor Secretary, co-founder, Inequality Media, and the author of numerous books, including his latest, The Common Good. Inequalitymedia.org is the website. You can tweet him at RB Reich, R-E-I-C-H. Professor Reich, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm great, and it's so nice to have you back on. And you are writing about one of my favorite topics, which is antitrust law. Which, you say that and people's eyes glaze over, but this is the bottom line for capitalism, for functional capitalism, is that there has to be competition in a marketplace. And it seems to me, I mean, you write specifically about the e-business, which I want to get into, but it seems to me like there's not literally a single industry left in the United States that is not dominated by somewhere between 3 and 6 companies and functionally a cartel. What does this do to us? How has this affected America?
Well, it means higher prices, for one thing. Monopolies are breaking out all over. It also means that innovation is being squelched, because once you have these big monopolies, it's very hard for smaller companies to get into the market with new ideas. And this is exactly what's been happening in high tech.
Now, I remember back in the early 1980s, I remember reading an article, and I hope I'm remembering this right, I mean, it's been a long time ago, but reading an article in one of the papers, I think it was the New York Times, about how there was a debate in the Reagan administration about the enforcement of antitrust laws. And then over the course of the next year or so, it seemed like they had basically just stopped enforcing the antitrust laws. And it led to this explosion, what we called mergers and acquisition artists, right? These M&A artists, the masters of the universe. And they made movies out of it. And was that the beginning of the massive consolidation? And is it actually true that Reagan, by and large, stopped enforcing the antitrust laws and that we haven't seen any consequential enforcement of them since?
Yes, I think that's essentially it, Tom. Ronald Reagan and the people around him decided that the magic of the marketplace could be trusted, and they didn't see something that even Adam Smith, writing in the 18th century, the philosophical figure who was the father of right-wing economics, understood. That is, if you don't do anything, if you simply let big companies get together and merge or acquire each other or become very dominant, then they begin to set prices. And not only do they set prices, and here's something we have actually witnessed. I mean, we witnessed it in the 1890s in this country. We did something about it. That was the beginning of antitrust laws. But they also have a political function. They use their dominant economic wealth and position to affect politics, to undermine democracy. And we are seeing that obviously all over the place, especially with the biggest companies that now essentially their big money and the big money of a handful of wealthy people are the key figures behind the Republican Party. And also, let's not mince words. I mean, Democrats are also taking a lot of big money from the biggest corporations that are big because they essentially were allowed to get big and powerful.
Yeah. In 1944, the New York Times asked Vice President Henry Wallace if there were American fascists and if we needed to worry about them. And his response was not what I'm assuming the Times was expecting. He basically called out cartelists, or cartelists, or however that word is pronounced. And he said that their goal, he identified these as the American fascists, that their goal was to combine their economic power in a way that could seize political power and then use the combination of those two to keep the working man in eternal subjection. I think was the last sentence of the article that he wrote for the New York Times. Is this, I've been referring to this for years as the cancer stage of capitalism, or unregulated capitalism. Are we there? Is that what's going on?
Well, in many respects, we certainly are. And what we have to revive antitrust law. You said people's eyes glaze over. Basically, this is government already has the tools to break up monopolies.
Right.
Government used to do this. I mean, this is not some. We broke up Ma Bell, the big telephone monopoly, and then Teddy Roosevelt at the turn of the last century broke up the Northern Securities Railroad monopoly, and we broke up the Standard Oil monopoly, and these gigantic monopolies dominated America, the American economy. They dominated American politics, and we can do it again. I mean, in fact, we have to do it again.
Now, the breakup of those monopolies back in the late 19th, early 20th century were there was enormous popular support for that, in large part because these giant industries were engaging in union busting. I mean, you had open warfare between workers and management. There's not, I don't perceive that level of antagonism toward big business in the United States right now, or is it there and it's just not as visible? It's not spilling out into the streets.
Well, it's not very visible. We don't have, unfortunately, much of a labor union movement left. I mean, in the private sector, fewer than 7% of the workers in the private sector are unionized. You know, in the 1950s and 60s, it was over a third. And when you have so few people who are unionized, they don't have much of a voice. And we know American workers don't have much of a voice because essentially wages for hourly workers, 85% of the economy, 85% of the workforce, those wages have gone nowhere. Adjusted for inflation, they are exactly where they were about 30 years ago. And so these big monopolies are exerting huge power. Not only are they keeping prices higher than they should be, and they're also stifling innovation, making it difficult for small businesses to get in, but they are keeping wages down because they have so much power politically and economically over the economy.
It seems that there are a couple of ways that monopolies could be regulated or broken up or altered, having to do with either vertical or horizontal integration. I mean, for example, if you were to say to Facebook, you have to divest yourself of all these companies that you've acquired, right? Instagram and all these other things, and just be Facebook. Would that be a start? But then you still have Facebook having essentially a national monopoly in whatever Facebook is, whatever you call that. Or if you were to say to Amazon, you know, you can sell books and you can sell garden tools, but you can't sell everything else. Or, I mean, functionally, how do you do this?
Well, you put your finger on a couple of things that could be done. You could say that these big, and Facebook and Amazon and Apple, and these are the companies that are in many ways the largest, most powerful in the country right now, and Google.
Right.
You could say to them, you cannot acquire any more companies. You cannot basically act as a monopolist using your huge profits to gobble up other companies and make and make it so that those companies can't function as competitors. You can also tell them that they have to license some of their proprietary, some of their software to other companies, because much of their monopoly power comes in their networks, and that network effect becomes hugely important only because they have software that nobody else can get. You could say, for example, to Google, your search engine is so dominant, nobody else can get in. You are abusing your power with the search engine. You're putting on the first 10 searches, the various companies that you own. Well, you can't do that anymore. You've got to license your search engine on the same terms to anybody else that wants to provide searches.
Right.
There are many things that antitrust could do. The final, nuclear option is basically to say to these companies, you're being broken up. You're going to be busted up into 12 or 15 or 20 pieces. But that's not necessary. Antitrust law is much more subtle than that. But it's got to happen, Tom. Otherwise, these big companies. I mean, look what happened recently. The United States, the New York Times revealed just recently that Facebook executives, they withheld evidence of Russian activity on the platform.
Right.
Far longer than previously disclosed, and they also employed a political opposition research firm to discredit critics. Now, how long is it before Facebook actually threatens critics, threatens to use the huge amount of data it has, the huge information bank that it has, to unload on critics and silence critics, essentially. I mean, this is the danger politically of monopolization.
Professor Reich, we have just about a minute till we hit a hard break. Thomas Jefferson famously begged James Madison not to allow monopolies, or he called them monopolies in commerce, and what he was talking about was patents and trademarks. Then later he wrote 3 years. That should be the maximum. Wouldn't another way to do this be to change the copyright and patent laws and shorten the time that a company can hold essentially that kind of a monopoly?
Yes, we certainly could do that. And many of the big Google and Facebook and the others, they do depend on intellectual property, and that is their monopolies, and we could shorten the time that they could have patents and copyrights. But to the extent that they are based on network effects, and by network effect, I simply mean that the more people who use it, the more other people have to use it because everybody else is using it. That's not a patent problem. You really do have to force the companies to license their proprietary technology and allow others to get involved.
Right. That's a critical mass problem, essentially.
Yeah.
Professor Robert Reich, his latest book, The Common Good, the website inequalitymedia.org. RB Reich is the Twitter handle. Professor Reich, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Tom. Bye-bye.
It's always great talking with you. I always learn something. Thank you very much.